All right, welcome to another episode of the Meat Mafia podcast. We are joined today by Dr. Phil. Now, we do this cute little thing at the beginning of every episode where we say, you're our first guest who's done this and that. You're not our first Dr. Phil, which is very unfortunate, but you are our first behavioral finance economic expert. So we're excited to have you on.
It's my pleasure, guys. It's great to be here. I love what you guys are doing. So it's absolutely a pleasure to talk with you guys. I'm probably as curious about you guys as you are about me.
Excellent.
Yeah, we were saying before we hit the record button, there's 1,000 different directions that we could take this. I mean, we personally love your Substack newsletter, Prime Cuts, by the way. We both read it all the time. We're fans of you as a person. And we think that our audience is going to love this too, because we were saying how you blend together all these different disciplines, whether it's nutrition, psychology, performance in the finance field. So there's a lot of different things that we can talk about. But I think just to quickly start, Dr. Phil, I think we'd love to just learn a little bit more about your background and kind of how you've woven all these different disciplines together in your career.
Well, I will tell you this, that when I earned my doctorate in clinical psychology way back in the day, I gravitated towards a certain view of psychology called integration. And what really that focused on was multiple different schools of psychology. So you had your cognitive behavioralists, you had your analysts, like neo-Freudians, you had your experientialists, you had your pure behaviorists or radical behaviorists or operant conditioning guys. And then you had a smaller group who was saying, okay, wait a minute, there are similarities and differences between all these guys, and everybody's looking at the same glass just from a different angle. And so let's figure out how we can put these things together in a way that is elegant, not just smushing them all together. And these guys became theoretical integrationists. And so that's the way my mind worked. I wasn't even aware of it at the time that I was an integration. I just gravitated towards that. Now I'm much more sort of like on a meta level, like self-aware, but I just gravitated towards it. And then when I got out of school, finished my dissertation, I got into finance. It was around the time of the bubble, and I was of the NASDAQ bubble way back in the day, 99, 2000. I think I did my internship 99 into 2000. And I was fascinated by markets and got involved in a hedge fund, got actually recruited because I was getting into behavioral economics. And even there was like, even behavioral economics is an integrative science, right? It's economics and psychology. And that is supposed to be theoretically elegant. There's some elegance to it, but there's some smushing too. So I got all into that. Was into markets, did that for a long time, got into social media early on. I was involved I was an early investor in StockTwits and worked there for a long time and invested in social leverage way back in the day. And that was an integration as well, right? That was like the beginning of Web 2, where all of a sudden it was like it was read and write. And so there was an integration there too. And so everything I've been involved with has been an integration of multiple areas of study. And so that brings us to today and really where I'm at. And what happened was, so I've just, also I'm ADHD. So I've like moved on to all these different things. Everything has brought me up to this moment. One thing I discovered much more recently in the last like 5 years or so is that I was in the desert for 40 years, when I was very, very young, I was an athlete and I was all into it. And then I got so far away from it. Got into like just partying too much, not taking care of myself. I was a lot, 50 pounds heavier than I am now, than I've been for a while. And more recently, I've just discovered it's like, oh my God, my 11-year-old, the 11-year-old me that like just loved to play ball all the time. That's like, I just rediscovered that. Like that's more a part of me now, or as much a part of me now than it was when I was 11. So that really got me to where I am now. Now I'm really focused on longevity, really taking good care of myself. And also I'm at a place where I have the capacity and the bandwidth to be able to try to help other people. and try to help other people get healthy as well. So that's really where I'm heading right now.
Well, Dr. Phil, if people came across you, I think like if they came across you fresh, all the stuff you're writing about now, or most of the stuff you're writing about now, is really around health and wellness. You have this newsletter, Prime Cuts, right? Prime Cuts newsletter. And
Right.
you're really talking about weaving together psychology, personal health, personal autonomy, all these different health topics that fall under a pretty broad umbrella. And I think most people will be like, this guy was in finance. This guy was in behavioral finance. So it's cool to see and hear you talk about where you're at now, because it is kind of this this part of your story that I guess for like 20 or 30 years, it sounds like you were just in a different world than what you're talking about mostly now. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there was always an element of psychology, and it's always this path, like Dorothy takes the Yellow Brick Road, right? She goes around this big circle, then she has all these adventures along the way. Everybody's life is that way. There's a million, it's mythological, the long and winding road and the Iliad, and it goes back forever. So we're all on a journey. And that is just, the journey that I've taken, the path that I've taken. And I will tell you this, that the major takeaway here for me, the big thing that I'm working on, the big thing that is the most challenging component of this, and I'm going to tell you something, you guys are going to run into this like crazy. What you guys are doing is great, by the way. I don't know. I know I said that before the call, before we started this, while we were just talking. I love what you guys are doing, but something that you're going to run into, that everybody who's into health, that wants to help other people get healthy, or help other people eat better, or help other people become more active, or whatever it is, the same thing that they run into is that there's a huge difference between knowing what the right thing is and doing the right thing. So it can be incredibly frustrating, even in our own lives, where we know, hey, this is what I should be doing, but I'm not doing it. Fuck, why am I doing that? There's this idea. I mean, just imagine having obsessive compulsive disorder, right? This is a classic example. The frustration related to it. Like, you're sitting there washing your hands, right? Compulsively, you can't stop washing your hands. What you're doing is hurting you. You can see the sores on your hands because you wash your hands 100 times this week and you can't stop. And it's just incredibly frustrating not being able to stop, even though it's the wrong thing to do. People have that issue in smoking, drinking, nutrition, movement, all of the major things. Rest. We know we need our rest, right? There's not many educated 50-year-olds running around out there, or 35-year-olds or whatever, who aren't aware that rest and health and performance are really, really critical part, that they're positively correlated. And so we know, so self-awareness isn't necessarily always enough. So this difference between, so the thing I'm trying to crack that is very, very difficult is moving away from just being like, hey man, don't do that. Stop washing your hands, dude. Just imagine you went to psychologist, you were depressed. And I was just like, I was a psychologist. I was just like, stop being depressed, dude. Snap out of it. Shit's not that bad. Go outside, have a little fun, get a girl, whatever. Like, you can't just do that. You can't just snap out of it. So that is the nexus that I'm operating at, where I'm trying to catalyze processes of change within people rather than just tell them what to do. Because telling them what to do is so easy. We all know what to do. Like, anybody, you could take, like there was this guy who just got arrested who was like this big keto guy, right? Sick guy. He was a fat guy and he was preaching keto, and everybody knew he was fucked up, but he was really charismatic. Like, he told a great story. So he had people that loved him, even though something was obviously off there, like what's going on there. So that's the place, man. That's the place that we have to get. We have to get to this place where we inspire people to make changes, because we're part of a counterculture, right? You guys, one of the reasons I love you guys, we're part of we're different movements, right? I'm more, hey, I'm getting a little older. There's a lot of people I see out there who aren't in their 30s anymore, who aren't young anymore. And life gets really hard if you're not taking care of yourself. I'm there for those people. You guys are working with younger people. way hipper than me and like, hey, you know, this is nutrition. This is what you want to put into your body, how you want to fuel the only body you'll ever have. Very different, but we're part of the same sort of macro movement, even though we're leading different movements, you know what I mean? And so that'll be a challenge you guys have. It's a challenge I have. Processes of change rather than just, hey, I'm going to explain it to you. Now go and do it, knucklehead.
Yeah. And when you think about trying to actually get people to do the right thing, because we totally agree. Harry and I were just having this conversation the other day. We had on Tucker Max on the podcast, and he was saying how on a platform like Twitter in particular, it's so easy to just wag your finger basically at people's faces virtually and tell them not to do this or not to do that, and how that's just a terrible tactic to get people healthier. So when you're thinking about getting people to do the things that they should be doing, is it almost the atomic habits approach where you're trying to get people to build these sustainable habits and systematize their life in a way that allows them to be healthier? I know it's probably a complicated answer, but is that how you're kind of approaching this problem?
It's a complicated answer, and there's an art to and a science to it. The art, you either have it or you don't. You either inspire people or you don't. And, you know, I remember when I was in grad school, one of the first advisors I was at a hospital and I was like working with people. And I had this advisor who was famous. I never mention that person's name, but they were famous. They had written several books, serious books, like heavy shit. And they in a clinical situation, they were clueless, like they couldn't do anything. And it was just, they didn't have that thing, whatever that thing is, that inspiring thing, the Vince Lombardi thing, you know, whatever the great coach has it. You can't, you're born with it or you're not. You could probably get better at it as you practice it. You could go from if you're a 5, you could go to a 7, but you can't go from a 2 to a 10. You know what I mean? You could get better, but you either have it or you don't. That's an element. That's the art part. That's that you're inspirational. Then from the science point of view, there were these guys within the integrationist movement who were looking at common factors. And so they were like, okay, across all the different approaches to psychotherapy, what are common factors that seem to have a power to them, right? And so one of them was the relationship, right? If I have a good relationship with you, right? If you like me and I'm helping you, and we have a good relationship, and I like you, and I understand you, and you feel like you're understood, that will help. If you buy, that's one thing, the relationship. 2 is if you buy the rationale, if you buy the story, if you hear the story and you go, that makes sense. I buy that. If you buy into it, like when you're reading a great book and you're in that world, like you can't put the book down and the phone rings and it like takes you out of the world. You were in that whole other world, right? It was okay, I'm in Middle Earth. If you're like reading Tolkien or whatever that shit was, you're in there. If you're buying the rationale, that helps. If the art part's there, if you have an inspirational person who you're working with. Also, there's the event, right? There is the profound event. And a lot of times that's like a health scare. You know what I mean? Like somebody that I know really well who came to me, who's lost 60 pounds, changed his life. And this guy's like 5'7". This guy was like 5'7", 255. Now he's under 200. Think about that. 5'7", 250. It's a big guy, right? He went to a doctor and the doctor said to him, hey, dude, your blood sugar level is, you're on the cusp of diabetes as we speak. This is a guy I know really well. I've had several conversations with him, never bought in, over years, 4 or 5 years, calls me up that night. Phil, I went to the doctor. He said, my blood sugar, I'm about to have diabetes. Dude, I'm going to be 60 soon. I'm freaking out. It was religion. So there's the event. So there's the inspirational Vince Lombardi guy, right? Art part, nobody can quantify that perfectly. There's the rationale. And by the way, the rationale can be used negatively too, right? Cults, religions, insane political leaders. I'm not going to mention any names. Traditional old school religions that get people to give all their, you see those preachers on the Sunday morning TV and they get them, they're the richest guys in the world, but they have people sending them money. People just buy the rationale. It's the same, those same components. So you have, so you have that, the rationale, sometimes the scaring event, the life-changing event, somebody gets into a car accident, somebody's blood sugar is too high, somebody gets a health scare, right? A near-death experience, a heart attack, whatever. So there are elements. I think you guys mentioned another element, and that is that if you just try pointing the finger, that actually has a negative effect.
Yep.
You're going to move people further away. Everybody in the world has this thing inside them that's their own person. And if you fucking put your finger in somebody's face, what do? They go the other way. You know what I mean? So that's like that's like the repelling effect. So those are process components. Even though we understand some of them, it's still a lot of art to it.
Dr. Phil, when you talk about a catalyst for change, I think about a lot of things, but one of the things that comes to mind is this idea of building intuition. I think a lot of people like off-port or outsource their ability to go through a decision process and feel confident about it. And Brett and I are both athletes. When you're an athlete, you get put in practice situations that are like the game. We both play baseball. If you're not practicing situations like, and you can create parallels here, right? Like the situation where there's a bases loaded, their infield's in, ground ball hits you at third base. What do? You go through that situation tens of hundreds of times in practice. And I think personally for myself, the best thing I've ever done for my health was making more decisions and experimenting and try to figure stuff out on my own, and doing that in a way where I feel like, okay, I'm building my own intuition. Even if I make the wrong decision, at least I know that I'm making the decision and I'm figuring out exactly what this world and what the outcomes look like when I make those decisions. Is that something that you think about in terms of building intuition and really kind of figuring out how to be the captain of your own ship? Because at the end of the day, like, no one's out here gonna be able to save you unless you do the work and build out your own intuition and confidence for yourself to do and live the life you want to live. So I think there's a piece of that that's just, it's not intuitive. You can build that intuition to make better decisions around health.
I feel very strongly about N equals one, N equals you.
Right.
And, we are all observers and we are also participants.
Yep.
And so we are doing an experiment on ourselves every single day, every single action, everything we do. I do feel very strongly about that. However, and this is a big thing, and this makes it even more complicated what we were talking before about how people change, not just the what, but the how, the process, not just the thing. And that is that everybody has different personalities. Everybody has their own, everybody's an individual. So different people have different ways. There's going to be some people, you're very much an intuitive person and you've done it over a long period of time. I probably identify with you guys more. I'm that way too. And so I sometimes I don't even have schedules. I just know, oh, my body needs rest today. Oh, I feel like running 5 miles. Oh my God, man, I'm going to do 100 pull-ups today. Oh my God. It's like, and I just go by that a lot, but other people are very different. Other people are much more linear or right or left brain or organized, and they need to have an order. So you have to have I think we as potential change agents have to have a respect for the way other people are. And so as a matter of fact, when I do a post that's like, okay, here's how to get started intermittent fasting, or here's what to eat, those posts get huge reactions, even though for me, they're more like a laundry list type of post rather than like a think thing. And the reason is because people are looking for like the answer of what to do. And then as they get more sophisticated about it, as they have, 10,000 reps, or, they field, the 10,000 and first ground ball in that 1 out man on first and third situation, moving up at third base. You know, do I go home? Do I go to second? Do I go to first? Before, you know, while they're waiting to have that many reps, they have that linear guideline, or maybe they just have a linear personality and they're always going to do, hey, I have my list. I'm going to do my list. I'm very organized. You know, the last person that I hired, right? One question that I asked her, I needed somebody who was going to be organized because I'm certainly not. So one question that I asked her was, you know, how many unread messages do you have in your mailbox right now? And she was like, I'm at 0, you know? And I was like, all right, listen, take a screenshot of that right now while we're talking. Don't take 5 minutes and send it to me. I saw it, like she sent it to me right away. I was like, okay, I'm hiring her. Like she's going to want to have it all laid out. She's going to have that schedule because that's the type of person she is. Beautiful. Yep. You're very different. You're more intuitive. I could see that in the way you guys approach food. That there's a very intuitive basis. You're going by, you're putting things in your body and it's like, oh my God, I feel great. And you are aware of that and noticing that, which is critical, but that's you can't assume that for every single person in the world.
Something we've noticed too, I forget what interview you were doing, but you were mentioning how clients will come to you or traders will come to you and say, hey, Dr. Phil, how do you feel about spirulina or blueberries or these, you know, supplementation, kind of as like a magic bullet type solution? And you very adamantly were like, you need to be running away from this stuff and going towards the ground beef, the fish, the eggs, kind of like food as nature intended. That's the ultimate magic bullet, or whatever terminology you want to use. So my question for you is, at what moment was your paradigm of nutrition kind of questions, or what moment did you realize that those are the foods that are going to make your body function the best and perform your best?
You know, we all have a sixth sense. And that sixth sense is interoception. And that's what we're experiencing internally, what our body's experiencing. We live in a culture that is very dull to interoception. We wear these watches that tell us what our heart rate is. We wear watches that tell us how many steps we've taken. We're dull to our own internal experiences, our internal cues. People tell us, don't pay attention to that. Or we just live in a culture that's our culture is toxic on many, many levels. That's why I'm saying, like, we're part of related movements, but not the same movement. But there's this umbrella, and that umbrella is a counterculture that is moving towards health. And it is occurring within a larger culture that is toxic as fuck, right? And so we have this shared responsibility, even though we're really, really different. Listen, I get my ground beef at Costco. I'm not going out to the farm. I know you guys are purists. I love it, but I don't. I mean, occasionally I do. I love it. And I can tell the difference. And I love it, whatever. Just that's not my thing. You know what I mean? And I'm older and I'm into, healthy aging and a long-term path. But we are under the same umbrella. And really that umbrella is that we are all counterculture, moving towards health, rebelling, oppositional, healthy opposition against a culture that is whack as fuck. And so one thing I think we all need to be doing, whether, and that's what I love about what you guys are doing, so many podcasts in such a short period of time. And you're going with a very wide lens. You're not like, hey, I'm just going to find people who are into the exact same thing I'm into. But anyway, talking about interception. So we're very, very disconnected from that. That is a sixth sense. It's a superpower. What is our heart rate? Are we rested? Are we tired? Did we sleep well? We don't need a ring to tell us if we slept well and if we're tired. No. We know. It's a sense within us that has existed since the beginning of us as a species. For millions of years, we've honed it. Our dogs have it, right? When our dogs are tired, they sleep. When they're hungry, they eat, right? When they, when their balls itch, they get
a little scratch. Yeah.
They do their thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just, that's what they do. So that is a superpower that we have that has not been unleashed. in most people around us. Most people are walking around very dull. That's why they feel like they need devices, quantified self devices to help them measure. I forgot what we were talking about before, but it's an important point. The sixth sense is a huge point.
Yeah.
It's something I think about often. Oh, you were asking about the spirulina and all that stuff.
Yeah, just these people go for these magic bullet solutions, and you're like, dude, ground beef from Costco, fish, eggs. What are you
Right.
talking about, right?
Right. Stupid simplicity.
Stupid
Right?
simplicity.
Stupid simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
Rest, move, eat real food. That's all you have to know.
Done.
That's it. That's all anybody has to know. Maybe, relationships is important. Maybe what you do, but really the three things are what you put in your body. You're fueling the only body you will ever get, because when it's done, it's done. You're finished, kaput. Moving that body to keep it vibrant, and resting it so it has a chance to heal and rejuvenate. That's really the secret. So everything else that you put on it, whether it's these devices that, guess what, tech companies are selling you, these tech companies, they present themselves as being very altruistic. Hey, we're here for your benefit. But meanwhile, they're just, raking money, and they're doing it at scale. They don't have your best interest in mind. You have all the tools inside you. Keep it really, really simple. Ground beef, broccoli, eggs from Costco. I get that every week. Maybe maybe some salmon. And that's it. That's all you have to do. People don't understand that. So you guys, part of your guys' responsibility, I think, is to just explain that, hey, we're telling you about this kind of food that you can eat. Not only is it delicious, but it's fueling the only body you'll ever have. And it's like super, super primo unleaded. Like it's that top one. If there was one more even on top of that, that's the one that I'm teaching you about.
Yeah.
Maybe the three of us, Harry, should take a second to talk about the Costco versus the farm meat, because that's actually probably a good example of like bridging the gap between these similar movements that we have and making sure that we're all on the same point, because there are a lot of misconceptions, I think, right? Because there are people that are like, oh, you need to eat the regenerative meat right from the local farm, where I think a lot of what we're trying to preach is like, if you can give your dollar to your farmer, like we think that nutritionally and it feeds the right incentives. But at the end of the day, to your point, it's like keeping things super simple. Why would you turn someone away from being able to get their meat from Costco, their fish, their eggs, things that are going to fuel their body? Like that's kind of the distinction that we're trying to make, because there are camps of people that are like, oh, if it's not regenerative or if it's not grass-fed, grass-finished, you shouldn't be touching it. And it's like, that's just so ass backwards and just takes away from the movement that we're all trying to push.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. So, I think that we are purists in the sense when we're preaching the regenerative agriculture, grass-fed beef. But I also think that you need to approach these things with a grain of practicality and, realism. And you can fight in these two worlds between these two, yes, would the perfect world be you're getting your beef from up the street from a rancher who and who you're supporting? 100%. That's, I think if we were to paint a picture of the perfect world, you're buying locally, you're able to support the local rancher. But again, at the same time, you are obviously trying to solve for a number of different factors here, right? Like what's going to fit within your budget? What's your time constraints? There are multiple constraints on an individual level that going to Costco and getting your food is not a bad thing. Like, if you're getting the right things, like Dr. Phil's saying, I think it's 100%. You're on the right side of the equation. Like if it's a 0 and a 1, going to Costco and buying ground beef is a 1. Like that's a win. So I think that we try to message with like, hey, the ideal way to do it is go to your farmer, shake his hand, but the umbrella reaches further than that. Like supporting Costco and obviously doing things within your means is obviously the most important aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah.
I would only add to that. That was well said, you guys, and I appreciate it. I appreciate hearing it. I will add to that, and this is mostly where I'm coming from here. We are living in a culture where more than half of the people living in our country are obese, or overweight, obese, or morbidly obese, more than half. And the way that we got there was not because we stopped eating local. It's because of large multinational processed food conglomerates who have incredible marketing budgets, incredible lobbying budgets, incredible test kitchens where they are concocting addictive, just rancid, just horribly addictive foods, and then marketing them in such a sexy way to unsuspecting people who don't know any better. Dude, I remember being 11 watching like Super Friends on a Saturday morning cartoons. This is like, I'm so old, you guys. This is pre-cable TV. I'm watching this shit on UHF, channel 45, WBFF Baltimore, local, like it's like fuzzy, 10 o'clock in the morning. And guess what? I'm watching this cartoons. And then guess what? Cartoon commercial comes on and it's Count Chocula or Tony the Tiger. And I'm 9. I'm in, Tony the Tiger tastes great. Tony, Frosted Flakes are delicious. Frankenberry and Chocula is delicious. I'm totally brainwashed at that point. That is 0 to 99. And then 99 is Costco ground beef. And then 100 is where you guys are.
100.
So we have this huge, or at least this is the way I feel. I have a huge responsibility to work with people who are at 7 or 9. They're eating stuff out of a box all the time. They don't even realize they're eating it. They're eating things that don't give them the nutrition that they need. And so they eat more, not even understanding that they're still hungry because their body's asking for one thing and they're not giving it to themselves. So that's really where I'm at, getting people from that place to this place. Now, where you guys are is it needs to be there. It's the pinnacle. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Like, it's the Porsche, it's the Maserati, and you need to have those. You need to have those best vehicles as a pinnacle, as an ideal to work towards and to think towards and to move towards. That's part of the respect that I have for you guys. And I do think we're all on the same team. What you guys said before was perfectly said.
I'm glad you view it in the same way, because I think it's an ecosystem that works together, right? You need a bandwidth. You need people who are working at different levels here. Like everyone, I was reading in one of your posts on Prime Cuts, everyone's starting from a different place. You're not going to want to like start talking about health and speaking to, the purest pinnacle like of health standpoint for like, that's not going to work for everyone. Everyone's starting from their own spot. They need to hear the story from a number of different people from a range of different backgrounds, so that when they do hear the message that sticks, it's someone who is saying, hey, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to improve a few things, and then you can work towards this perfect idea of health. But it's good to hear you say that, because I do think that it's an ecosystem here where, everyone's playing at their different range. And I think that it all works together to kind of move this whole health movement forward. Because frankly, like I was laughing, both of you guys put out great tweets. I think one was actually Dr. Phil in one of your newsletters. It was like the FDA posted National Chocolate Covered Anything Day, and it was someone dipping a slice of pizza in chocolate. And then Brett posted the Krispy Kreme donut for getting the booster. I'm like, there's just like this almost illogical way of thinking about health when you start actually looking at like the FDA is posting about dipping pizza in chocolate. What are we doing here? I mean, it blows me away a little bit.
Here's the thing there, and this is really a sad reality that I've come to over time. that I didn't want to believe for the longest time. And that is, we are all on our own. There is nobody that is going to, there's nobody who's going to take care of us. There's no mommy and daddy. The FDA is not going to take care of us. The health system is whack, right? I mean, it's super whack. Nothing could be worse. The government does not have, in the FDA and the CDC or whatever these organizations are, whack. So all of us are individuals. All of us are responsible all of us are adults. We're all responsible ultimately now, if people like us can help other people, fantastic. A lot of times I think, if I write a piece or I put a tweet out or I do a podcast and, 1,000 people or 5,000 people or 10,000 people are going to see it ultimately or read it ultimately. If there's one person out there whose life I affect in a positive way, awesome. I did something, I contributed to positive karma in the universe, whatever, I'm good. So I often think about it that I'm writing for one person. You know what I mean? Like I often think I'm like going for that one person out there. But the cold hard fact is, and every single person who's watching this, who's listening to this, has to understand, is that there's no mommy and daddy out there. There's nobody who's going to take care of them. There's no system that has their best interest in mind. We've all been to doctors before who don't remember us. We've all been to doctors before who spend 7 minutes with us. And before they ask us any question that's specific to us, have to look at a chart because they don't know who the fuck we are. Yep. We've all been in that situation. The health pyramid, the food pyramid is completely whack, upside down. And so there's no mommy and daddy out there. There's no government. There's no force. There's no healthcare system that's going to look out for us. We're all on our own, ultimately. I don't say that because I'm a libertarian. I'm not a libertarian. I say it just because it's true. Like, sadly, it's true. It's reality. So how do we mitigate that, right? What do we do? Well, we find people that we relate to, like what I was saying before about processes of change. We find people who we can relate with, who seem to have it together, who are like, wow, this person, I'm buying that theory. Like, that makes sense to me. I'm using my best judgment. Obviously, what I've been doing hasn't been working, and we connect with a group that is making sense. We watch what they're doing. We learn what they're doing. We do what they're doing. It works or it doesn't. Sometimes you connect with a group. I'm not gonna cast aspersions. I'm not gonna talk about vegetarians or anything like that. But we connect. Sometimes we have a false god, or something doesn't work, and then we move on to something else. But once you find your thing, once you find people out there, social media is poisonous, but there's some really great things about it as well. We could discover people with like mind, people who have been successful doing what we want to do, right? I mean, like, you look at Dr. Tro out there, right? By the way, Dr. Tro is my doctor. I live 20 minutes from him. And I was like, oh my God, my doctor's so bad. This is like, 3-4 years ago. My doctor's so bad and I'm going in a completely different direction. I got to find a great doctor. Well, I follow this, and I'm like looking around. And then I'm like, well, I follow this guy Tro on Twitter. Maybe I'll reach out to him and see if he knows anybody in my area. So I look him up and he's 20 minutes away from my house. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But anyway, that guy is a total inspiration, right? I mean, that guy's the real deal. He weighed 350 pounds and he's helping people every day. And he is helping to, on a larger scale, he is helping to challenge the system that we know is whack, that we're talking about right now. He is playing a larger and larger. Right now, it's like this, but from a whisper to a scream, and it's just getting louder and louder. And obviously, he's talking reason because, there's days where I won't eat till 6 and I'll, cook up a pound of ground beef, mixed in 10 eggs, eat it, not hungry again the rest of the night. And then I lost a pound the next day. It's like something's going on there, right? Like he's on, he's on to something. So we're all on our own. We got to find the people, use social media. If you're watching this, chances are you have found some pretty good people. Because the Meat Mafia mission, I freaking love it. First time I saw you guys. So okay, I'm turning the camera on you guys, right? I just want to hear a little bit about you guys' origin. You guys came out of nowhere. At first, we're sort of anonymous or what's that?
Pseudo, yeah, we say pseudo anonymous. Yeah,
pseudo anonymous. But you guys were sophisticated when it comes to social media. You weren't just using it for the first time. I mean, you came out right out of the gate with a brand that was clever and all that. What happened there? What is the genesis of that brand?
Well, it kind of speaks to everything you were just talking about in terms of finding people who are like-minded or inspire you. Both of us were living together in the fall and in Austin, training for a race together. And this was October timeframe. We were living together and kind of just fueling off each other's craziness a little bit. Like we both love just the idea of being healthy, being active, and our other friend groups, are that way. But I think we were both taking it to an extreme and really curious about what we could do with it. And I think both of us really, at the time, didn't realize how much we wanted to be contributing to this space, this movement, in terms of personal autonomy, better health. And I think that when we were under the same roof, sharing the same habits, sharing meals together, sharing ideas, we got to the point where we were a month in, we just finished this race together. We ran an Ironman together and we were like, how can we keep this going? Like the mojo that we had built in that month was based around us two being great friends, having a ton of fun, getting in the best shape we've ever been in. And all we wanted to do was project that forward. We were like, we need to keep this moving forward. So we extended our lease, or we got another Airbnb for another month. And then I ended up signing a lease down there. Brett was living on my floor at one point. And that was basically the genesis of us starting to write about this stuff. It was about December, and I started writing for this guy, Texas Slim, who's on Twitter, about regenerative agriculture and where our food comes from and the problems in the food system. And then at the same time, Brett and I we were living together. We were talking about this stuff constantly. And we're just interested in seeing these two parallel universes, the healthcare system and the food system, both struggling to figure out, the underlying issue is like people are unhealthy. And so we just started writing about it. We came up with these names, these mafia names that honestly, I mean, it was a joke at first. Like we were laughing about it when we were coming up with the names, but we were, again, just having fun with it. So that was really part of the brand, was like, hey, we're going to do this like light, sort of funny meat mafia concept. And we started writing and started getting traction. So we just kept going. And, we started doing the podcast in March and have done like 65 episodes in 90 days. That's part of the story too, is we're able to connect with all these great people. And Brett, I want to give you the mic here, because I'm sure I've missed a ton of parts that you want to talk about. But I think both of us have had our own health journeys too. Like previously, I'll let Brett speak to his, but I was working a corporate job relatively. I was always the health person, but started losing that a little bit, working long hours, getting stressed out, not sleeping enough, eating poorly. And that all changed for me during COVID. And so this all led to that experience in October, which, was life-changing in a lot of ways. Like the catalyst for change was two like-minded people who had a similar tenacity for life, just living under the same roof and getting excited about the same concept. So it's been a lot of fun. We're really excited with where we're at. We think that there's a ton more to come, and are just excited to keep building this thing, because we keep coming into contact with great people who are motivated and inspired by the same things, which is like, hey, we've got a problem here that needs to be fixed, or we're going to run into some serious issues if more people don't start taking their health a little bit more seriously. So Brett, I don't know what I missed there, but fill in the gaps for me.
No, the only other thing that I could possibly say is, I think like the commonality between the three of us on this call, and probably anyone that's listening to this podcast right now, is that we collectively understand the feeling of taking control of the food that goes in your body and just how unbelievable that actually is. Like for me, when I realized that I could cure a 6-year battle with ulcerative colitis just by eating almost the majority of animal products, I realized that everything that I had been taught about medicine, nutrition, etc., was basically ass backwards, because I did everything that they told me to do. I was eating the standard American diet. I was drinking too much alcohol. I probably wasn't sleeping enough, kind of just following those typical unhealthy college behaviors. Ended up sick and in the hospital. And through the power of the internet, connected with people like Sean Baker, Rob Wolf, all these amazing people in the paleo, keto, carnivore space, and started eating the majority animal products, getting away from the inner aisles of the grocery store, like you talked about, Dr. Phil, like returning to real foods as God and nature intended, and feel the best that I've ever felt. And now we're in a position now where we're able to help build this movement and teach people about food. It's like when you have your own amazing experience with it, you're pulled to almost want to do something in the space, because you're like, fuck, you think about this concept of shared energy. And you said it before, it's like 6 out of 10, or what is it? 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. I think 1 out of 3 are pre-diabetic. 80% don't even know that they have it. So you imagine a universe where you can correct that number and people are healthier, they're living better, et cetera. Like you're talking about, having more energy to play with your kids. Like, what is that worth? That's literally a priceless investment. And you imagine if we can get more people to experience those feelings and what the world would be like. So like, that's why we fucking put out 70 episodes, because we're just so motivated. We want to build this into something and just try and help as many people as possible.
Brett, maybe to add on that, like, I think a lot about the idea of like, what world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in the world where you're taking doctor's visits constantly, seeing friends go to the doctor constantly? Or do you want to live in the world where like you and your friends are going and booking your next trip to the mountains and going hiking, or booking your next beach trip with your families who are just enjoying being healthy and enjoying life? I think that there's so much simplicity to the message that we try to put out there, but it is much more of like a societal thing where we've just gotten normalized by this idea of like, this is these doctor's trips, that eating this way, it's all normal. And it shouldn't be that way. I think that there's a lot of bigger issues at play that are weighing on people, and they, back to like the intuition point, they know something's wrong, either like with themselves or with like a family member, but they just like don't know how to act on it. And I think that when you look backwards, like there are tons of like pictures, and I think for me, it personally helps me a lot to know where I came from. Like my grandparents were involved in my upbringing. I knew both of my grandparents on both sides, and like I can hear their stories in my head talking about how amazing their generation was, just like they were rooted in something. And I feel like at this moment in time, we're kind of getting a little bit disconnected with that. And I think the health movement is something that everyone can kind of buy into, and kind of share that like uplifting feeling of getting healthier together. I think there's a lot to that.
Well, it's great to see what you guys are doing, because it's fighting the good fight. And like I said before, if you even just help one other person, because the culture that we're living in right now is really toxic. It's toxic across multiple modes of experience. It's not just nutrition. It's not just movement. It's cognitive, right? Mm-hmm. It's the way people are thinking and the traps that we're falling into there. It's emotional, and the way that we are avoiding feeling. It's physical, and people not moving. It's attentional, and what we're occupying our time with and our attention with. It is across multiple modalities of experience. And so we have an incredible responsibility to try to pull ourselves first and our loved ones. This is my point of view anyway. Ourselves first, our loved ones second, and then anybody else that we can possibly in a direction towards health, whether that is around what we put in our, what we're fueling our bodies with, how we're moving, the way that we're relating with each other, the things that we're doing with our time. All of it is super, super important. We have a mission while we're here on this earth. It's only one time that we get to be here. That's where I'm at, and I see what you guys are doing. I love the story. I love your Genesis story. It's fantastic, and I'm not surprised at all. And you are on to something very, very clearly. I feel it about myself too. I can feel it. I feel it when I get emails from people. I feel it when I get when I get, people reach out to me and then I call them, people that I know. A buddy of mine hasn't had a drink in over 6 months. This is a guy I've known well for such a long time. This is just the latest in it. This is a guy that I love. He's my homeboy. He's my buddy, right?
Yep.
And he is thriving. And he calls me up and he's like, wow, man, I didn't even know there's this whole other level, of how I'm feeling and my relationships and things that I'm doing. It's fantastic. So, okay, here's another question I have for you guys. You guys are considerably younger than me. And I know that so we were talking before about the whole behavioral thing, right?
Yep.
So, behavioral finance, behavioral economics, it's really comes from a cognitive behavioral model of the world, right? So in about 70 years ago, 50s, there was a cognitive revolution, cognitive sciences, where we were able to study what was happening, between our ears in a much more sophisticated manner than we ever did before. And it just so happens, in fact, it's not a coincidence that the advent of, Moore's law and the computer chip paralleled with that, right? Cognitive revolution, our computers, right? It's not a coincidence, that whole thing. But that whole thing happened. And then so this whole sort of cognitive behavioral social scientific point of view came to be. And then we started getting applications of that, applications to behavior, applications to economics and finance, which happened more came out of that in the 60s and really 70s and 80s is where that really took hold. But fuck was I talking about? Guys, you have any idea whatsoever?
Something about our Genesis or something different. You're saying how there's age gaps between the two of us?
Oh, so you guys are you guys are much younger, right? And so, okay, so here's where I was going with that. So drinking, right? So here's a behavioral thing. When you're young, you could get away with anything, right? Your body, you're in high school, you're in college, you're just out of college. You could party late and then get up and play baseball or run or get to work on time. And what you're doing there, unfortunately, is you are training yourself from a cognitive behavioral point of view. That was the thread. You're training yourself, right? You're training your thinking and your behavior to be able to do these things. You're reinforcing bad behavior, really is what's happening. You're in college is just this giant reinforcement of bad behavior, right? Stay up and drink, party. It's all good fun. And then guess what? You get up the next morning, you go to class, you shake it off because you're young and you have that much energy. But the thing that's wrong with that is that you're training your future self, because those patterns become habits. They become solidified over time. They become ossified. And then what happens is you wake up one day and you're 40, or you wake up one day and anytime after 40, and you're 50 or you're 55. As a matter of fact, I got a question the other day. Somebody hit me. I'm 42 and I'm lazy and I can't do one pull-up. Is it too late for me? That was the question. And I was like, dude, it is not too late for you. You can change all of it, man. You can rewire the whole thing. It is not too late. But the older you get, the more people, the harder it gets to rewire. Granted, there's a lot of 50-year-olds running around. They got bad patterns. They're going to have bad patterns and it's going to end poorly for them. It's just too bad, but it's just the truth. I'm just speaking truth. Any older ones in your audience watching this, you're going to see that. So here's my question back to you guys. So younger, a lot of drinking, a lot of alcohol, I call it kindaholics, right? And a lot of people running around. If you're in your 30s, if you're in your 20s, you're in your 30s, you can get away with being a kindaholic, right? You can be sort of alcoholic, but you didn't lose your job. You got Uber, so you're not driving drunk. you're still married, or you still got a girl, or
Yep.
you're not, your wife's not leaving you. You didn't lose your house. The world hasn't fallen apart for you. So it's like, so you guys aren't drinking much. I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure. I think I've even heard you say that. What do we do to, what do we do to catalyze at a younger age so that people don't form those habits while they're young that get harder to break when you're my age, when you're in your 50s?
I think it's such a hard question to answer, but I'll do my best. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? Like college age kids now have normalized what almost, if you walked into any college party, there's like normalization of binge drinking left and right. And on top of that, there's other habits that are being formed there too, staying up late, not getting enough sleep. And then they carry that into the working world. And for the first like 3 to 5 years of their career, they're normalizing the Thursday, Friday, Saturday binge drinking cycle out at a bar. So it starts young. I mean, I think it has to start before college, before you get to college. And in a lot of ways, Brett and I have probably both fell victim to this at times, where you just get caught up in the college scene and you end up having more drinks than you want to, and something's wrong, but you're in the cycle. You end up doing what all your peers do. And so for me, I think that there's one level that starts before you get to college, but once you're in college, it's pretty structurally significant at this point. Like it's a part of the American culture in colleges where you're going out 2 nights, 3 nights a week and going to class hungover. Like that was something that if you're not doing that, you are in the minority, which to me, It's like, okay, that speaks to something that's not just like the N of one. Like it's very structural. So I think it does need to start with like grooming good habits before you get to college, getting a better understanding of yourself, learning how to say no in tough social situations. Like I think that a lot of people really do fear being the odd one out. And, I see it today being the one who's not drinking. Like I'll go out to a bar and I'm like, man, this is just weird. Like, I'm the only one not drinking. And I feel like, people kind of project that on you. Like, oh, you're the guy who's not having fun. I'm like, I'm having fun. I'm enjoying myself. I'm just not going to wake up tomorrow and feel like shit. So I think that, a lot of it is just that early habit forming. Like, I think you just need to get a strong sense of saying no and being who you are. And you don't actually develop that until you're later in life. But like, even if you can get some realm of that power of being able to say no and start to just focus on 1 or 2 good habits early on, I think it will pay dividends later on.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think you touched on that concept of the pain pleasure principle for yourself, for how you make decisions now, where you've gone through all the iterations. You've done the binge. We've both done, the three of us, you've done the binge drinking culture in college. You understand the repercussions. And now you're on the other side of it and you realize how good you feel versus how shitty you feel if you're going to be hungover or you have 4 to 5 drinks. So you can focus on one, just the feeling of feeling really good not drinking. But secondly, if I ever need to like be convinced not to drink, I'll think about how shitty I feel being hungover, how it's going to take me 24 to 48 hours to get back to my baseline, the sleep disruption, all that stuff. So I think anchoring yourself to pain versus pleasure is super helpful. And then I also think if we're to take it back to what you were talking about, there's definitely a psychological component that I think needs to come from the parents of teaching your kid to have genuine confidence in themselves, which I know is kind of a loaded statement. But when I think about the concept of going out to a bar or a nightclub or at a party, it's almost very fearful type behavior where it's like, you're almost like trying to forget who you are by drinking. So you try and act more almost like courageous or do things that you would never do sober. Maybe it gives you some liquid courage to talk to a girl that you would never normally talk to. A lot of times the lights are very dim, so you can't see people. There's music blasting, so you can't really hear other people. It's kind of like this weird fake environment. So I think that if you can teach your kid when they're young how to kind of cultivate that genuine confidence to be able to go up to someone, shake their hand, look them in the eye, go up to the girl or guy that you're attracted to and just approach them and have a normal conversation. I think that kind of takes a lot of the pressure away from drinking because you're like, all right, well, I don't need to do this thing that's not great for my health because I have genuine confidence. And I also have the confidence where I don't care if I'm the only one not drinking, or I can drink a club soda with lime and be perfectly content. Or if I am going to drink, maybe I'll have one glass of wine, or I'll have a tequila soda with an element mixed in so I get my sodium. Like, I think just that psychological component and having that genuine confidence is really helpful, because most people just get guilted and they don't have the confidence to be able to necessarily stand up for themselves, and they keep falling back into that behavior.
Going back to comment I made before about, I appreciate you saying that. And by the way, I have kids. One is 16 and the other's 14.
Mm.
So I'm like right at that
Relevant
period
to
of
you,
my life.
100%.
Right there. And I'm pretty straightforward with where I'm at and where I've been. So they understand. Still have my own my own anxiety about them going away and launching into the world and all that, as every parent does. But I just wanted to go back and mention one thing from what you guys were saying that goes back to something I said much earlier in this conversation when I mentioned Frosted Flakes commercials and Count Chocula commercials. And that is that the beer and alcohol conglomerates do the exact same thing. They have beautiful women on the commercials, and it really makes it cool. Hennessy is so cool, and it's in hip hop culture and all that. And I just want to bring that up. I don't necessarily have a take on it. I think it's a shame. The older that I get, and the more that I see sort of the way the world works, this stuff is not necessarily cool. So it's being portrayed as cool by marketers who are creating commercials, who are manipulating us. And maybe if we think about it that way, it's not as cool anymore, because nobody likes to be manipulated. Nobody likes to feel like they're getting taken or tricked or bamboozled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these marketing agencies, I always think of this one. It's the Pepsi commercial, and it's like this young kid sitting on a bench outside of a gas station, and he's listening to a Rihanna song on his headphones, and he's drinking a Pepsi, and he walks by, or Rihanna walks by as he's listening to a Rihanna song. Like, this is the best marketing I've ever seen, and it's so targeted at this very specific age group, like drinking these sugary drinks, these caffeinated drinks, two highly addictive substances. I'm like, man, the ethics there really, like, it's predatory in a lot of ways, and I think it's very alarming to see that stuff fly, because it's pretty dangerous when you kind of look at what we're looking at now. If you can look back over the course of history, these are the types of things that we normalized, and now we're dealing with a health epidemic that is as bad as it's ever been. Chronic diseases left and right. So I think the marketing stuff is huge. I mean, it plays a huge factor in all this.
Predatory was the perfect word.
Yeah.
Perfect. I got one other thing that I want to talk about, fellas.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind, if you guys will indulge me.
Absolutely.
So I am more and more focused on this. And I do have a background in finance and in media and finance, media and marketing. And I'm making I'm making a change from that. And I'm focusing more and more. And I'm going to be making some announcements fairly soon about this, and launching my own endeavors in this field. But I want to talk about personal health planning, because one thing I see out there. Okay, we were actually talking about this before, about the quick fix, and I was actually researching today the history of snake oil. Is really, really interesting. There's a whole thing, and it goes back to like China, and then Europe, and then in the US. And in the US, we love a quick fix, right? We love a secret elixir. We love a medicine. We love the spirulina or whatever, some concoction, or Weight Watchers, that it's like a trick to doing it, or a pill or whatever. And there is none, right? It's all like, hey, eat well, rest, move. It's simple, but it's not a quick fix. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes the rest part.
Yeah.
But there is a path, right? So in financial planning, so financial planning is this huge industry, and it's a wonderful industry, and I'm very close to it. Have a lot of people who I'm really close with, and a lot of people who I've helped launch their own media and their own content, who are in the advisory space. And what the best of these people do, and they call them fiduciaries, people that have a responsibility to the well-being of their client. What they do is they help the client plan for their financial future, right? And they say, hey, you got kids, you got to send them to college. You want to be able to not have to work one day when you're older and have more time and freedom to travel or take care of your own health or whatever you need to do. Healthcare costs are crazy. And so we're going to help you plan. We're going to help you position yourself in the most tax advantageous way. We're going to help you put things in buckets where you're saving and where you're continuing to save over time. We're going to help you allocate the resources that you have in the most rational way so that you have the most at that time out in the future, right? And we're going to try to do that in a way that doesn't sacrifice your present as much. You have to sacrifice some. I mean, that's how I view wisdom, right? Wisdom is being able to plan for your future in a wise, rational way without totally sacrificing your present, right? So, however, there's really not that much being done in the exact same frame with the exact same long-term time perspective in the area of health planning. And so that's what I'm becoming more and more interested in, is this idea of personal health planning. The reason that I'm putting it out, and I hope you guys will indulge me here, I hope you don't mind. This is obviously, it's coming from a authentic place. This is the thing that I'm obsessed about right now, and the thing that I'm going to be obsessed about. That area, that personal health planning, thinking about long-term health planning. So in other words, it's not, hey man, get great abs in 90 days or get buff or lose weight for the summer. It's not any of those kinds of pitches. It's not the snake oil pitch. It's not the it's not the get super healthy, really fast, get buff pitch. It's the, hey, you're going to get healthy slow, patiently, methodically, without injury over the long term. And it really does involve, there's the major three components, and then there's all these minor components. And I'm not minimizing them by saying they're minor, but our relationships, our mindfulness, our happiness, those are all components that are important. But really the three that are central that every single day affect our health, our bodily health, and our spirit, is rest, movement, and nutrition. That's really what I'm thinking about. And I just want to throw it out there to the viewers and to you guys. Any thoughts you have? I'm very early in this journey. I know this is where I'm going for the next 10 years of my life, but I'm in the top of the first inning. First pitch was a ball. I'm looking at the second pitch right now. Anybody out there who has any thoughts about this, who has any thoughts about the connection between health and wealth, or just long-term time perspective in the area of health? And it's not just longevity. Longevity is a part of it, but it's not just that, because there's this idea, like there's a law of diminishing returns too, right? Like you could do everything, and then you're not living today. You know what I mean? Like you could take 50 supplements and you can wake up at 8:57 every morning and go to bed at the same exact time and the bing and the bang. You can't do that, right? You're going to drive yourself crazy. At least I can't. And I think most people can't. There's a medium in there somewhere. I just want to throw that out there as a new area of study that I'm really interested in, that I'm just beginning to explore. I have some knowledge in the area of time perspective and how we value time. That's a behavioral economic concept, actually, is hyperbolic discounting. We tend to value things in the future less than we value things today. The fancy word is hyperbolic discounting. but there's all these different components to it. Just the ability to think about the future, right? The ability to do, there's people who can build bridges and there's people who can't build bridges, and you're building a bridge, you have to plan 10 years from now, because it's going to take that long to build the bridge or whatever. So I'm just throwing that out as a topic of conversation. It's a topic of study, and as an endeavor that I'm going to be following up on, much more in the future. I'm curious what you guys have to say about it. And if anybody watching it has any thoughts about it, just hit me on Twitter at Pearlman. Or, that's probably the easiest way to reach me. But thoughts about that, you guys even think in those terms, or you're just thinking about, hey, I feel great today. That's part of it. But hey, I feel great today, so I'm going to continue to do this thing.
Well, my underlying health goal is to be able to ski when I'm 80 or 90. So that's my game plan, is stay healthy so that I can ski with my grandkids and, ski late into my life. So I definitely think in those terms, but I think that the way you're framing it around this health as wealth and the financial freedom aspect of it, like people are always planning for the future in terms of finances, but a lot of times they neglect their health in that endeavor. And it's counterintuitive. Like if you don't have your health, you really you're fighting an uphill battle in a lot of different ways in life. So I think that with this idea that you're talking about, like it might not be the sexiest idea when it's like simple and you're just talking about the basics, but in finance, what gets the job done for long-term financial health? It's the basics. It's getting good at those basic skills. So I definitely think there's something there in terms of just thinking about the long term. Like don't worry about the 3 month 6-pack abs. Worry about the 3 years. Like you want to be healthy and playing soccer with your kids, or doing all the activities that you want to do in your life. I mean, I think that a lot of times we get so focused on what we're doing right in the moment that we kind of can't pull out and just be like, what are we really living for? We're living for these moments in time when we're able to enjoy time with other people, enjoy our health. And like, that's kind of gets diluted in the world that we live in today, when people are really just focused on, going to work, paying the bills, like all these things that are important, but you're not planning ahead for your health and like being able to lean on those things so you're really getting the most out of life. So, I think planning for your health is a great concept. I love that.
Awesome. Skiing at 80, fucking A, man. That's like, you just keep that, like, that's the point.
That's
you
my
don't need
North
much
Star.
more than that. You know what I
That's
mean?
my North
Like,
Star.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. North Star.
I also think that what you mentioned before, Dr. Phil, this convergence of nutrition and a fiduciary is incredibly fascinating. We always talk about, right, like just incentives naturally drive behavior. So the benefit of working with some type of a financial planner that has a fiduciary, it's like, that legally they have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of your financial best interest for yourself and your family. So is there a way to interweave some type of fiduciary responsibility on the nutritional angle? Because I know for myself, if there was a way to work with some type of nutritionist or someone that had a fiduciary responsibility to my health or my mom's health, I would obviously work with them in a second. So I don't know if that's what you're thinking about, Dr. Phil, but that's like the first thing that came to mind for me when you were just speaking.
Yeah, I'm thinking about helping people plan for their long-term health optimization. Yep. And working within the same flow as the advisory space. That's where I'm headed.
Got it. Well, something that we also love about what you do, and you touched on it earlier, is this concept of bridging the gap. And one of my favorite things that you've written was about a month ago in early May, you wrote a short Substack post called "Where Do I Begin?", which was just in response to all the questions that you were getting around how you think about structuring nutrition. And I was reading this blog and I was expecting it to be pretty long. And there was literally just 2 sections, and it was just eat real food and walk. And you basically give out what those foods are. You give an approved food list, you give a walking cadence. And I think that stuff like that will just help anchor people towards their North Star and act as this gateway, because like you mentioned, we talk about this all the time, especially now, there's so much fucking information. Do I go keto? Do I go paleo? Do I buy this supplement? Do I buy that supplement? What about hydration, electrolytes? There's all these little nuances. But to your point, it's like if you just start walking and eating real food as nature intended in the outer aisle of the grocery store, you will instantly build that momentum. And then we'll get you to the changes down the road of maybe buying the regenerative meat or maybe signing up for CrossFit or jujitsu or whatever those ancillary things are. But let's start with the big macro level items that will maybe, like, I look at that article and I'm like, that's literally something that I would love to send to my mom, because she wants to get healthier. She sees what we're doing. She loves it. She's not going to be eating raw liver and going carnivore, but guess what? She would definitely look at those lists of foods that you put and walk and start to implement that. So I just think I'm basically rambling right now, but I just think that stuff is so fucking good, man. It got me fired up when I was reading it.
I really appreciate you saying it. There's such a need for that first steps thing. I get emails every week about that. Every time I put out an article, I get feedback coming towards me that is like a very, very basic, very, very basic. There are so many people that are so hungry to just get started, to just get out of whatever that rut was that is part of like this toxic culture flow that we've all, that so many people have fallen into, that we have to, that's another part of our responsibility. And I'm saying all of us here, that umbrella of the multiple movements, we all have this responsibility to just help people with the first step, because there's so many people out there that need the first step. Sometimes we forget because we get more and more advanced and we're doing, crazy jujitsu shit, right? And, eating crazy foods and like, really thinking about this fine tuning of our sleep, our circadian rhythms, and all these crazy stuff. We just can't forget. We can't go too far out there. We can't go too far out there because most of the people are not there. Most of the people are at that place where they're like, hey, okay, if I'm eating basically the right foods, because you eat those foods and it helps solve that hunger satiety issue, because you're giving your body what it needs. You don't need to have, or you don't need to just eat the empty stuff. And then if you begin moving, that's like a gate. I think I use that term, gateway drug. It's like a gateway drug into more movement, because we're all progressive animals and we all want to kind of move on. I was just looking at, I've been thinking about progression a lot, like how you move from being a beginner at something to being super advanced at something. And I was looking up this violinist. I was looking at Paganini. Paganini was like this crazy violinist composer that wrote this stuff that like people can't play, like it's way out there. So I was looking like at YouTube and like finding like these guys who could play Paganini, and they're out of hand, right? Like they're playing crazy. And I was thinking about those people before I'm writing about it this week. So I'm like all in the weeds on this concept progression. But I'm thinking about, there was a moment where that person, it's like Adrian something. I was like, look, I have it up on my browser somewhere. Before that person ever played the violin once in their life, right? There was a day where they picked up a violin for the first time and they had no idea how to tune it. They had no idea how to play it. They had no idea how to hold it, hold the bow, strike it, finger the notes, the ear, and what was an E and what was a or what was a whatever. They had no idea. And then they progressed to this point where they're like blowing up, right? They're, like playing the crazy, but playing the crazy stuff. It's the same thing in jazz too. We are all capable of that. So like, it's like that one thing. It's like, just go for a walk, man. Just,
for a walk.
That's like, playing the scale, learning to play the scale or learning to tune the violin when that guy who's a virtuoso was 4 or 7 or whenever they picked up the violin for the first time.
Well, you've got a finance background. How much of that is just compounding interest in that concept of momentum when you go from doing 10,000 steps over 10 days to starting running longer and starting to get in the gym more often and starting to eat better? It all funnels down this one stream, but you got to start, and you need to, as you said, like you're picking up the violin for the first time, like start with the basics. Like you're not going to be playing the most intense songs right from the get-go. Like I remember at the beginning of COVID, I was just focusing on walking and eating right. That was all I was doing. It fits your story to a T. It was
Perfect.
like, and I got in the best shape I've been at that point in a long time. Like got back to like playing weight for baseball, felt amazing. And then from there, it was just catalyst. Like everything else has happened since then because I started focusing on the basics again. I think there's so much to that.
Exactly. Perfect. That is exactly it. It's like, where do you start, and then you go from there. And that's where a lot of people are right now. I mean, you had a great, you're very blessed. You did it. You made your reality happen, which is fantastic. But there are a lot of people, and during a very difficult time, there's a lot of people who went the other way during COVID, who are drinking more, who gained more weight, who became, move less as a result. Mental health is another thing. Didn't even mention that, but from a mental health point of view, our culture is also in a very, very, very difficult place, and COVID didn't help with that. But you were super resilient. You went a different direction. We need to help people who are at a basic point right now, because so many people are. And I think it is a gateway drug. I think there is a path. And I think that we all are, we're progressive animals. And once we start, and there is momentum, right? And we know for a fact that price momentum exists, like in markets, everything, there's momentum in everything, right? Out in, first law of motion or whatever, right? Objects in motion stay in, or second law, objects in motion stay in motion. So we have, I believe, I know I do, and I feel like you guys do too, have a responsibility to try to spur as many people as possible in that direction, to begin doing whatever it is, even if it's very small steps. I think there's room for advanced stuff too. There's a lot of people who are hungry for that as well, that you guys are finding. I'm finding it too. I also get, it's very bipolar. I get people who ask incredible advanced questions, things that I have no idea what they're talking about sometimes, and I have to go research it. And then I get a lot, I don't get a lot in between, so I get a lot on both ends.
Yep. Dr. Phil, when you think about this concept of just momentum, like you're talking about, nutrition, just your overall perspective, are you generally optimistic about the future? How do you think about those things?
I am incredibly optimistic about, my own life and about the people around me. And that's where I start. So my own health is the most important thing to me. My family is the second most important thing to me. And so I'm very, very optimistic about my own path and my family's path, my wife and my two kids, and some of the people and, some of the other people who aren't necessarily blood relatives, but I'm close with in this. And I think that happiness is local. Like there's that expression, all politics is local. I think all happiness is local, right? Like we create our own world. We live in a constructivist universe. We have the ability to create our own reality within some limits, but to a great extent, we have this ability to do that, and that we can do that. On a broader scale, differentiated. I think some people will thrive and some people will suffer. And I hate to say that. I'm really sorry to have to say it. It actually hurts me. I have to stop just for a second because I'm thinking about it. But it's sad to say, but it's just true. It has always been true. It is true today. We think we live in this crazy time. We have so much noise coming at us. We're seeing so much of what happens all around the world. We see crazy events happening every day, and we're like, oh my God, but things have been crazy forever. I mean, it's been how many years since Billy Joel wrote that song, We Didn't Start the Fire, right? It was like always crazy since the world was turning, or whatever the lyrics were. And then, there was that poem years ago, The Center Cannot Hold. I mean, who was that? Yeats or whatever. He was saying it, I don't know, 100 years ago or however long that was. So it's always been that way.
Mhm.
So there's always going to be like a lot of people who are suffering and don't make it. And then there's going to be some people who do. If we can help one more person make it, fantastic. That is a blessing that we're doing. But I think I'm mixed. It's an impossible question to perfectly answer because I'm not one way or the other. I think some people are going to thrive, some people are going to suffer, and it's a sad truth that there's going to be that much suffering. That's a very Buddhist thing too, right? Like Siddhartha goes out in the world. He's a prince, and he goes out in the world, and he sees he's never seen any suffering. And all of a sudden, he sees suffering. He sees all these people. He sees beggars, and he sees old men dying in the street. He sees all these people suffering. He's like, "Holy fuck!" There's this whole world out there. There's people suffering. It's just nature. It'll always be, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate the candid response. Sorry, were you going to say something?
I feel very positive about whatever this movement is.
Yeah.
These groups of movements that you're a part of one, I'm a part of another. They're all related. We mentioned Tro before. He's a part of one. There's a common bond of it being counterculture and moving towards health. And I'm really optimistic about that because I see it gaining steam. I see it gaining momentum. So I think more and more people are getting on with it. And people have rebellious streak. So if the culture is so toxic, there's going to be more and more people rebelling. Like you read any of those old dystopic novels, right?
Yep.
1984, Brave New World, was a really old ones, and Yachten. They were always about the protagonist, Fahrenheit 451, Bradbury. All the heroes are the rebelling people. Like they're the ones who are opposing, right? They're like, finding books or, meeting in the woods or whatever. They're the ones who are, revolutions are infinite. So I'm really, really optimistic about this sort of meta movement that's happening. It's not well organized yet, still really small, but growing. And I think it'll continue to grow over a long period of time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gravity to it. I think people are slowly waking up to the reality that like there's their own best interest rest right there with them. They can go make the decision to become healthier today. They can go do that today for their friends, their families. And I think that as people start to become more engaged with this world that is slowly growing, I think people will get more excited about it. I mean, we are having so much fun doing what we're doing. And I think that is kind of the precipice of all of it. It's like, we're having a blast talking about this stuff, living this way. And I think other people will be like, if this other avenue sucks that much and they look out the window and they see us having so much fun, it's gonna be like, well, should I just go do that? Like that looks way better.
You guys are already finding that, I'm sure. You guys are getting a lot of inbound of people like, what are you guys doing? What is this all about? How do you do that? How do I get, how do I get this thing? How do I find this food? How do I, whatever. I'm sure you guys are seeing it like crazy. It's awesome, right? That is an energy. It's fantastic. I mean, that's the thing. So that is to go back to your original question, that is a mark of optimism that we're seeing, and that I really think is growing. I mean, you guys popped up out of nowhere, just like boom. It might not have happened 5 years ago.
No.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, how do you not be optimistic about the future when you have a tool like the internet where you can just be building a brand just based off of your unique passions? Like we say this all the time. It's like, I think part of the reason why we've grown quickly is we've kind of just like leaned into our weirdness. Like there aren't a lot of 28-year-olds that are like talking about farms and regenerative agriculture and meat and curing crops. Like, and we love it. It's like, we'll do that shit all day. And that's why part of why I was asking you about the optimistic question, because we're close to 70 guests into this thing. And there's something about your energy in particular. It's like, I could tell by the questions Harry was asking, the questions I was asking, it's like you help lift people up to another level. So not even a question, just an observation, just like appreciate everything you're bringing to the table, because I already feel I've written down like 10 things of what I want to go do right off of this podcast. So man, I just appreciate everything that you're doing, and you're definitely making the world a better place.
Appreciate it, guys. And you guys, much love to you guys. I love what you're doing. Anything that I can do to help spread the word, to any feedback, whatever. Just love it, man. I mean, you guys are crushing, and it's great to see. And we just need more of it, more time. By the way, I'm going to be starting a podcast. I'm going to have you guys on, and it'll be like just cross pollination of
Be incredible
audiences. 1 + 1 = 3 all day long.
We're so here for it. And we appreciate, you and everyone else we've come across in this whole movement that's happening. I think it's amazing. And everyone's like-minded. I mean, everyone's just trying to steer the ship and just get the momentum going in the right direction when it comes to health, personal health. And then you kind of expand that, but, start with the personal health. So just really appreciate you coming on, Dr. Phil. This has been a great conversation.
My pleasure, fellas. Peace to you. Much love.